Here's something I've been thinking about. Prayer, obviously. But why is it that we seem to have no problems sharing a daily meditation practice or dream journaling? But when it comes to prayer, there's a squeamishness about sharing prayer practice, or that you even have one. And, that's not just amongst magical folk. It's everywhere in the secularized West. But amongst magical folk, it's a bit different. It's almost like prayer is something from the before times, right? That we left behind when we found magic and joined the cool kids in doing spells and enchantments and so on. There's probably more to it than that, but there is something there. And so in this video, I want to open that up a little bit for contemplation and exploration. So I want to look at prayer versus magic, prayer in magic, and then I'm going to leave you with a number of different prayer options for you to try at home that will allow you to perhaps come to a more embodied understanding of prayer and magic and prayer versus magic and where you relate to all of these topics. So as you can tell, I have booked this venue, this old church, to film the prayer course in. And I thought I might give you a little, Airbnb style tour of the property. And that's for a couple of reasons. The first one is it's so expensive. It's so expensive. And the reason it's expensive is caught up in the following reason, or two reasons as to why I wanted to share it with you. And this is so expensive because it's part of the, let's call it the bridal industrial complex. And that's first marriages, right? The good thing about celebrating second marriages is the bride-to-be is typically more, here's my credit card, order a few pizzas. But first marriages, the game is how you can bankrupt your closest friends by out-competing them when it comes to the lavishness of your wedding. And so I'm paying Bridezilla prices to be here. But that's got me thinking about how this structure has unpacked as an accidental metaphor for the role of prayer in quote-unquote Western society, which is important for us to sit with as we move into how prayer and magic work. So let me show you further around. Welcome to the church. And this is the cute little entry into what I'm talking about. Now, British viewers will be familiar with the perennial controversy of the Church of England's travails when it comes to keeping beautiful little countryside churches open so that couples from London can, toddle up the motorway and get married in a cute working title film style venue and then toddle back to London. Now, the trouble with that, if you're the Church of England, of course, is, well, hang on, these things are expensive to keep up. And so why do you want us? Do you want us just as a venue? Is this a declaration before God? And so on. And honestly, that's fair. See, more cute little moments. That's fair. That's a reasonable thing for the Church of England to table. But what I would say as a counter to that is if the Church of England wants people to show up to their venues for more than just a wedding, then they need to be less shit. And that's the next way that prayer and this venue, or at least the role of prayer in our society and this venue coincide. Because it's not just, oh, look, prayer used to be sacred, like a building used to be sacred, and now it isn't, blah, blah, capitalism, etc. That's in there. But the other side of it, is, well, yeah, how does that state of affairs come to be? And that is, I suppose, illustrated in the story of this building. So this church is, or was, built in the 1870s. I'm in the gold rush area of Victoria, and this is the gold rush land. Let's just say that, right? And the thing is, it was, as buildings in this area tend to do, well, it burned down. It burned down in the 1920s. And then it was quickly rebuilt. I'm just going to show you some of the outside while we're here. Was quickly rebuilt and remained a church for the next 30 or 40 years. And then it was deconsecrated and became whatever it was for a while there, I suppose, a private residence. And now it's this. And so what is this? What is it now? And this is, I guess, the final piece of prayer and society, right? Because this was a church, and then it was burned down, and then it was rebuilt. Still a church, place of prayer, underline. And then it became deconsecrated. But consider the fact that, I don't know, a few thousand people are going to watch this video, a few thousand people are going to do the course. Here's this humble little venue, as you can see, when it was a church, would have had a congregation of a few dozen coming in through here. Like, how many people do you think you're going to fit here where the congregation would sit? A few dozen at its heyday. And now a few thousand people are going to be implicated in this structure's exploration of the sacred once again. So what even am decommissioned at that point, right? Deconsecrated. What even am deconsecrated when you can get far more people to attend upon the notion of prayer in society using this structure as a invitational or opening metaphors than were ever here to worship and say actual Catholic prayers. And that's how we come around to the final implication of the role of prayer in society before we move into prayer and magic. Like the building, I mean, consider the shape of the building is itself centuries old, millennia old, really, when you think about the arches of the windows and where they came from in the history of European architecture. And then it gets entangled with the colonial story and the land story. Like, there's gold in this land, okay, which brought this structure here, and people who did things like get married and have funerals here. And then it became something else as the world changed. And now it's not, I don't own this for the love of God. That would be retirement money. But so it's become something else. And now it's doing something else yet again. Okay? And that's prayer in society today. It is a practice that is vastly ancient, that has tumbled through different forms, and we are called to, or you are invited to, attend upon what that looks like for you and what you think that looks like for society, for the West, and so on. So that's tabling of prayer in a wider societal context. Now we need to talk about magic. So, prayer and magic. Now, it may not have escaped your notice, but the world isn't great right now. And with the job that I have, host of Rune Soup, convener of the premium membership, I get the privilege, or have the privilege, of talking to a lot of very good, very serious magical practitioners. And this upwelling of a feeling of being called to prayer as something we're called to do, something that the cosmos is seeking to express through us, is very strong. So if you don't know how the course selection works, is that the members vote on one. And I gave them 3 options for this course, and prayer was far and away at the front of that little list. So prayer won in a landslide. And I get it. You get it. This is a time for it. This is a time for prayer. And the thing about magical folk is that we do like to be good at things. And we do like to develop and deepen our understanding. And because we come from a magical background, that's how we're going to at least begin the exploration of prayer around the differences and also how prayer is found in magic. Because consider this, 90%, just randomly, of spells in a Western context contain prayers. But actually only about 10% of them, maybe 12, are prayers. So it's everywhere in the practice of magic and rarely examined as an opportunity to get better at magic in general, but get better at a technique that is immensely difficult to avoid. And the thing is, there's lots of really poor takes about the difference between prayer and magic in Magic Land. And a lot of that may just come down to people haven't really devoted the mental time to fleshing out their own nuanced meaning around the difference. I'm sure I'm getting this from a book that I would have read 20 years ago, some flowery paperback, but that prayer is somehow begging the universe for something, and magic is manifesting and seizing and bringing into being. And we've all moved on since then, right? So, and you know what? Being kind to that terrible, don't get me wrong, take, it speaks to an underlying felt sense amongst the magically operant that there is a difference between prayer and magic. There is a felt performative difference between the two of them. It is not as easy as saying, oh, they're just both the same thing. It's like, no, they're not. Also, yes, on one level they are, on like a higher, less tactical level. But on a tactical level, that's not satisfactory. So let's take a Vedic fire altar. Is that a prayer? Can we say everything is a prayer? Yes, once again, at a, call it mystic level, everything is a prayer. On a tactical level, no, everything isn't a prayer. And when we get to Vedic fire altar, it's somehow a provisional no. Let's do that again. Let's think of the Orphic hymns. Is a hymn a prayer? Yes, at that mystic level. Tactically, is it? Is the Orphic hymn to the stars the same kind of thing as saying the rosary or a prayer to St. Expedite? You see how it's like a yes and a no? In that direction of building out the nuance, the tactical nuance, is the invitation to get better at both and get better at magic in general. And in order to do that, we need to make two important demarcations. So we need to make the demarcation within a Western, and I would even say Christian context, for reasons that will become clearer as we move through the course, between prayer and magic. So we need to discover a satisfactory definition of prayer and where it aligns and departs from a satisfactory definition of magic, which I actually did as an exercise for my friend Miguel last year, and you will find that linked up below. So that's the first demarcation, prayer and magic within a Western context. And the second demarcation that we need on our way to a felt understanding and satisfactory definition of prayer is the global comparison piece. So the prayer part that we are differentiating and saming from magic, and how it is similar and different to things that are either called or look like prayer elsewhere in the world. That's the nested twin road underneath the goals of the course. And we go there because in the same way that there is a felt difference between prayer and magic in the Western context, there is a felt difference between our understanding of prayer and other practices around the world. So my shamanic healing teacher, Alberto Violdo, has this take, which is that the West developed prayer, the East developed meditation, and the shamans developed journeying. And these are all, let's call them overlapping magical technologies. Now, the historians amongst you are, right again, putting your hand up, quibbling with that. And they're right to do so on a historic basis. He's a medical anthropologist. He knows this, right? But at the same time, there is a useful beginning demarcation there, because it does open us up before we get to the level of precise tactical detail of understanding there is a difference. There is something to prayer as a Western European Judeo-Christian practice that has enough difference to attend upon. And we should. We should, so that we surface those differences so that they can improve us, and at the same time widen that gaze back out to find the similarities. It's a breathing in and breathing out process. Goals of the course then. The main one is to get good at prayer in a magical context. And I would add to that, or maybe put in brackets around that, in a grimoire context. This is where we most commonly encounter, I think anyway, prayer in a Western magical context. Now, we do have a whole grimoire course which can explore this a little bit more, in a little bit more detail for you, but it can set off alarm bells for people. And so I guess the secondary goal underneath getting good at prayer in magic, bracket grimoires, is to approach the prayers of the grimoires in a, I don't want to say pagan or polytheist sense, that's not right. I want to say it a rewilded monotheistic sense. That's the key to unlocking prayer in a grimoire context, and then more broadly, I would say, in a Western magical context. So the upskills are around prayer in magic, brackets grimoires, prayer and magic, fitting that technique in with your, or inside your arsenal of magical techniques. And then thirdly, definitely last but not least, because it's certainly the thing that's on a lot of people's hearts, including my own, at the moment, which is getting good at prayer so that we can participate in this terrible, beautiful moment we are going through in a way that can potentially, although this is the thing about prayer, it's up to God, isn't it? Make the landing softer, you know? So that's it. Prayer in magic, prayer versus other techniques, and getting better at prayer so that we can contribute in ways that we are called to. I want to leave you with a prompt. I want to leave you with a giveaway. And that is to consider the threefold application of prayer in your life. Where does it fit? On a continuous basis? This should be something like a mantra practice. Where does it fit on a daily prayer basis? And where does it fit on a, let's call it a project basis, or a tactical basis? This would be things like novenas. And so to begin with, on a continuous basis, what I want to commend to you as a beginning exercise is the repetition of, in this case, the first 2 lines of Psalm 91. And I want you to say that out loud a few times, memorize it, and so on, and then roll it around in your head as you are doing other things, as you are cleaning, driving, what have you, obviously, etc., keep your eyes on the road. But it is protective prayer, so you never know. Jesus, take the wheel. Now, when it comes to the daily prayers, I want you to, and this is more like a as I lay me down to sleep idea, think about if/where the practice of prayer exists in your life on a daily basis. Amongst the membership, we do planetary prayers. Well, not all of us, but you know, it's a thing we do. What is do you pray at the end of the day? Do you pray at the beginning of the day? Do you pray at all on a daily basis? And if not, why? Like, have you sat with, I have considered my options, and here is exactly why I don't do that. I either have something that is similar to it, etc., etc. On a tactical basis, I want you to come to terms with novenas. The shape of this course, and when I say come to terms, I mean spend a bit of time fucking about on the internet. The shape of this course is shaped around a novena. So this is module 0 or day 1, and there will be 8 more days in this course. And it is a novena shape dedicated to Mary, undoer of knots. And that's the one I want you to start with. Now, we will elaborate on the why of this particular form later on in the course. But for now, let me give you a little bit of a bio. The veneration of Mary, undoer of knots, is focused around a painting, which is serving Ghostbusters 2 vibes, and that pleases me. It's very popular in Germany and in Argentina and Brazil. And it's popular in Argentina and Brazil because the current Pope encountered Mary, undoer of knots, in the 80s in Germany. I think he was in seminary at the time, and took the practice back to South America. So it's big in these 2 areas. The form of Mary, undoer of knots, as it appears in the painting, comes about because the cleric, the late 16th century Bavarian cleric who commissioned the painting, did so based on a story that his grandparents told him. They were having marital difficulties, and so they went to the local priest, and they brought with them their marital ribbon. So classic hand-fasting stuff at the time. You would put, at a wedding ceremony, you put the hands together and wrap it in a ribbon. And this ribbon was frayed because they'd been married for a long time. And the priest was calling on Mary to heal the union. And the first miracle was that the ribbon started to revitalize and started to reweave. And that was the beginning of this idea of Mary, undoer of knots. Now, it's the beginning of the idea of Mary, undoer of knots, because this particular prayer that the cleric's grandparents were involved in references or echoes some beliefs and sayings of the church fathers. In particular, the idea that just as Jesus undoes the knots of sin that Adam wove, so Mary undoes the knots of sin that Eve wove. Now, that's classic Madonna whore Christian misogyny, and many moderns, and rightly so to some extent, will bounce off that idea. Just park it, because it is something that we will explore going further into the course. But for now, sit with what a knot is magically. Obviously, we have knot magic. You bind things with knots and you unbind them. This is a very ancient archetypal idea. But in addition to that, we have a related notion of opening up, of smooth sailing, of open roads, roads that aren't knotted, roads that are straight. And it contains that feeling of the opening up of possibilities. And especially as the future is going to be a bit knotted, let's say, to attend upon the idea of the undoing of knots for oneself and for the cosmos is a very beautiful, very powerful idea. When it comes to doing that under the auspices of this particular form of Mary, the painting, and this, speaking of archetypes, is an archetypal bomb. The painting is Mary standing on the moon, crowned with stars, surrounded by angels, crushing a serpent, with what appears to be Raphael and Tobias as the 2 small figures underneath it. So even if you aren't a premium member, there is a very powerful archetypal form to come into relation with there. And if you are, it's got some, let's say, extra credit connections. So that's the novena that I want to commend to you as your initial exploration of Venice. Go and find whichever ones you want, because here is a form that contains within it a sufficient magical overlap and a sufficient deeper invitation to what I was saying before about rewilded monotheistic prayer. But for now, I'm going to leave you with a cheeky, provisional definition of the difference between prayer and magic. The difference between prayer and magic is who gets the credit.